I remember last year around this time, well, I should say in the preseason, I remember you talking about how the Golden State Warriors uh, were projected to actually take a big leap this past season. Was there another team this year that caught you a little off guard where you know the league as well as anyone, but did Shaney basically tell you you didn't know what you were talking about, and this team is going to surprise? Is Minnesota Timberwolves that going to be that team
Yeah.
this year?
Yeah, I think it's fair to say that they're probably the most surprising projection, having them right in the middle of the playoff picture. But I kind of figured that might happen. I have a sense for when I'm starting to enter everything into Shaney, which teams have a lot of guys who look good in the numbers and have a chance to maybe come out better than they should. And I definitely suspected that the Timberwolves were going to have a pretty solid projection. When you add in Rubio and Derek Williams, who was a guy who the numbers loved in college, and add them to Love, and Anthony Randolph, Shaney still loves. Shaney may get an argument with Zach later in the show about Anthony Randolph. So look forward to that. But this year, not as many huge surprises, I would say. I think to the extent it's having teams a couple places higher, a couple places lower than the general consensus.
Do you think people are irrationally going crazy about the Memphis Grizzlies this year, considering they surprised everyone last year and they brought most of their players back? What does Shaney think about the Memphis Grizzlies, and are they hated that they've become now?
Yeah, I don't know what to make of the Grizzlies. I mean, that's another surprising projection that now with Jarrell Arthur being out of the lineup, and it's a little unfair to say because I had to give all those minutes to Brian Skinner because he was the only other big on the roster right now. But they're below 500 and in, I think, 10th place in the Western Conference at this point. I mean, their success was legitimate last year. It wasn't a fluke. It wasn't a lucky performance against San Antonio and Oklahoma City. But at the other hand, does that tell us more than the entire course of the season? I'm not sure that it does. And as I pointed out on ESPN Insider the other day, people are saying, well, if they add Rudy Gay to this mix, what can they do? And understandably so, because Rudy Gay will make them better. But at the same time, part of the reason they were so good when Rudy Gay was hurt last year was because Tony Allen played like an above-average shooting guard with best defense in the league and then solidly average offense. And the offensive part of it was out of line with the entire rest of his career when he wasn't good enough to stay on the floor in Boston. So I don't know if he can keep that up. He's, a guy like Humphries, like we were talking about, where, I'm a little skeptical that he's going to still play at that same level.
So not to go all geek on all these listeners here, but was there anything statistically that you learned in the past year or added to your systems? I know the year before you added a little extra weight for 3-point spacing. Once you saw that the plus-minus numbers really favored 3-point shooters. Was there any research that you came across where you wanted to add something into your system, or maybe on the coach's side? Did you find anything that any discoveries in the statistical innovation department?
Well, the big research project I did this summer was trying to look at how to make Shaney better. And, last year it wasn't very good, quite frankly, the Golden State projection. There was a lot of teams that were kind of in the right direction. Like, Golden State did better than the general consensus was, but they didn't do nearly as well as we said that they were going to do. Same thing with the Lakers. They dropped off like we thought they would, but not nearly as much as Shaney said they would. So it's kind of distilling that down, and definitely made several changes. Incorporating assists into Shaney was a big difference, especially for teams like the Warriors that tend to come out too well because of the fact that we're not accounting for the fact that they, don't create a lot for each other. And then, there's other changes at the defensive end of the floor. The Lakers were an interesting thing where one of the reasons we always underprojected them was because of the fact that they're very good at 3-point defense, which generally is not consistent from year to year, but this year I was able to find some things to help project that a little bit better. And then the other change was accounting for teams that make coaching changes, because they tend to get better. If they were below average on the defensive end, they tend to get better a lot more quickly than teams that don't change coaches.
Okay, Kevin, I'll bite. I would like you to just, before you sign off, to convince me on Anthony Randolph with the caveat that I believe he is an untwisted coat hanger of horrible. So try to convince me that he is not an untwisted coat hanger of horrible.
Well, I mean, the first thing is obviously every time he's gotten playing time, he's put up really good numbers. And, you know, I watched a bunch of tape on him because I just kind of wanted to see what he was doing in Minnesota at the end of last season when he did have that chance to play extended minutes when Kevin Love was out of the lineup. And, you know, he's obviously tremendously skilled. You know, he's a better mid-range shooter than I expected. I posted about this on Twitter last week that, you know, he's not terrible there. He just takes too many bad shots. I mean, I think the big thing with Anthony Randolph is he needs to play. He's not going to learn where to be defensively sitting on the bench. You've got to just roll him out there for 30 minutes a game and accept the fact that, yeah, it's going to cost you a win or two here and there. But, you know, despite the fact that the projection has the Timberwolves in the playoff race, this is not the goal. The goal is to build something for 3 years down the road. And maybe Anthony Randolph can be part of that, and maybe he can't. But you're not going to find out if you don't play him, and he's not going to get better if you don't play him. So that's my position on it.
All right, well, that's I suppose, defensible position. To defend is the Mavericks. I guess they did use isolation to a degree with Dirk, but the thing that really characterized their offense was that freewheeling ball movement, sharing the ball, open guy gets to shoot. There's an article in the new book that's entitled, "We Love Ball Movement, Give Your Defensive ISO Ball."
Yeah, I think that isolation gets a bit of a bad name because of the fact that we're all aesthetes at heart. We want to see pretty basketball and an offense that involves everyone, and it obviously worked very well for the Dallas Mavericks, especially last year during the playoffs. You know, I think that was basically the key to their success was the fact that they were such willing passers, and when Dirk did draw a double team, he was able to kick it out to open shooters who made those shots. But you know, there's more than one way to come up with a successful offense in the NBA. And I think if there's one thing that I really believe in strongly, it's a diversity of options. You know, you can do it by playing a really slow style and doing a bunch of isolations like Portland has the last few years, or you can do it by, you know, playing up tempo and spreading the floor like, you know, Mike D'Antoni in Phoenix or something. Both of those work, and I like to embrace having both of those as potential options. But really, when you run the numbers, you find that how much a team isolates on offense has very little correlation to their success or failure as an offense, even in the playoffs, where I did kind of expect we might find something because of the fact that you can shut down that kind of a predictable game, especially if you're an elite defensive team. But again, the numbers don't really, over the larger sample, prove that out.
Very cool, man. That's some good insight where the numbers make me angry. Thanks a lot for coming on. I'm actually in Seattle now, so maybe we can meet up, you know, after Christmas or not. I mean, like, whatever. I don't want to put you on the spot on
don't do it, Kevin.
Wide
It's crap.
internet TV. But thanks for coming on, man.
Thanks for having me. And yeah, it would be good to interact in a way besides with cameras, you know, like this.
I should let you know I have a 3-second lag in my normal interactions also, so you're going to say something and it's, you know, just give me some time to process it.
Well, I'll have to deal with that, you know, do what I can.
All right, Kevin, take it easy. Thanks for coming on.
Thanks, Kevin.
Thanks, Kevin.